Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Muhammad Masroua, currently a master's student at his final semester at INCEIF. On behalf of the organization committee, I would like to welcome everyone of you to our fourth INCEIF Research Sharing Series. Thank you for joining us today. And just a little reminder before we start. So first of all, I hope that everyone can please mute your microphone. And second, if you have any questions to ask, please type them into the chat box. We will have a question session at the end, and I will read out your questions, and we will try to answer those questions as best as we can from our speaker, inshallah. So as an introduction, INCEIF Knowledge Management Center, KNC, is organizing this INCEIF Research Sharing Series to promote publication by faculty members to researchers and to the academic world. The previous sessions of this series was conducted last year and in March 2022, featuring INCEIF faculty members, Associate Professor Dr. Magda Ismail, Abdul Muhsin, also Professor Dr. Saiful Azhar Rusli, and Assistant Professor Dr. Kinan Salim, on various topics related to Islamic finance and banking. For today's session, we have invited Associate Professor Dr. Aishath Muneeza to share on the journal article that she co-authored recently with Professor Dr. Kabir Hassan, entitled COVID-19, Its Impact in Hajj and Umrah and a Future Direction. Before I invite our speaker, let me share with you our speaker background. So,
brother, just a correction. It's not co-authored with Professor Kabir Hassan. It's co-authored with Zakaria Mustafa.
Okay, noted. Sorry. Okay, good. So, Associate Professor Dr. Aisha hold the Bachelor in Law and also a Master degree in Law from Banking Law, and a PhD in Law from the International Islamic University of Malaysia. She is a pioneer of Islamic finance in the Maldives. She designed the country Islamic capital market legal framework, structured the corporate sukuk, and played an instrumental role in establishing Maldives Hajj Corporation, and also as a former chairman for the board director of Maldives Hajj Corporation, which is like the Tabun Haji of Maldives, basically. She has been recognized nationally and internationally for her contribution to Islamic finance, whereby she also was appointed as a Sharia committee member in one of the Malaysian Islamic banks. Her research is focused on the legal and Sharia implication of Islamic finance, Sharia governance, and Islamic capital market. So without any delay, and now let me welcome our speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Aishath Muneeza, to share on her research article that was published in the Journal of Islamic Accounting and Business Research, entitled COVID-19, Its Impact in Hajj and Umrah and a Future Direction. Dr. Aisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, brother. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salam ala ashafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Well, I welcome all of you to this sharing session. Today, we have chosen the article which I have co-authored, COVID-19 and its impact in Hajj and Umrah and a future direction. Now, briefly, today we will be looking at the introductory part of this topic. What are the research objectives and the methodology we've chosen for the research findings, and basically the ultimate part where we are going to focus more is the recommendations and the conclusion. As you know, Hajj or pilgrimage is a worship activity which is obligatory for all Muslims who are capable to have the financial ability to visit Kaaba and perform it. It is considered as the fifth pillar of Islam. However, when we talk about Umrah, it is not an obligatory act, but it is a recommended act of worship. Again, physically, you have to visit the site and perform this act as well. Now, when COVID-19 began, we thought that it is just a health crisis and there wouldn't be any other kind of implications attached to it. And it started in China, and therefore we thought it is just a local type of health crisis that we wouldn't have any relation with. But at the end of the day, we realized that we also are affected, and more than what we anticipated, our lives, the normal general life we were having came into a hold, and all the physical activities we were doing had to be changed online. And unfortunately, worship acts like Umrah and Hajj, we can't convert their nature from being a physical activity to online activity. And because of that, we understand that COVID-19 has religious impact, as well as it is a crisis to the whole humanity in different levels that we didn't anticipate ever in our lives. As you know, both Hajj and Umrah are something that cannot be performed online. You have to physically visit to the site and do the worship activities. And therefore, if you're unable to physically travel and do the act, it is impossible to say that you have performed the act. And as you know, since COVID-19 pandemic has forced all economic, social, and religious gatherings to be banned, at least temporarily basis, we understand that those activities which cannot be done in online mode cannot be performed at all. It should be suspended, and this happened to the Hajj in 2020. Foreigners, at least for foreigners, because they were unable to do the worship activities as they have anticipated, and Umrah was suspended for the time being until we understand how the COVID pandemic will behave. So as you can see from this slide, there were like announcements made. Saudi Arabia suspends Umrah pilgrimage due to coronavirus fears. Saudi Arabia considers limiting Hajj pilgrims amid COVID-19 fears. So obviously, we have to protect our life as the first thing we have to do from a Maqasid Sharia perspective. And therefore, if we fear that our lives will be adversely affected, if something threatens our lives, definitely from a Sharia perspective, we have to close all doors and ensure that our safety is first secured. And due to this reason, these announcements were made. And finally, we had to face the situation whereby the foreigners were unable to visit the Hajj site in 2020. And for Umrah, there were some restrictions. First, there was a ban, and then later on, some restrictions imposed as well. Therefore, our research objective was to focus on the impact of the pandemic in Hajj and Umrah by exploring its impact on different stakeholders affecting its disruption due to the pandemic. Now, some may think that there's only a religious impact. However, we understand that Hajj even have economic, social, and psychological impacts that it may cause as well. Therefore, it motivated us to do this research to find out what are the other types of impacts that COVID-19 has caused to Hajj and Umrah. Now, the methodology we adopted in this research is a library-based method using qualitative research methodology. We analyzed the primary sources and secondary sources to derive our conclusions, and we ensured that we referred to the latest data on the available on the subject, so that at least we could get the latest case studies captured in our research. Now let's look at the findings. The first thing is that it's realized that in the first year of the pandemic, while Umrah is entirely suspended, Hajj was scaled back and performed by 10,000 people altogether, which is a tiny segment of the over 2.5 million that partook in the ritual previously. And Hajj and Umrah have been greatly inhibited and jeopardized by the COVID-19 pandemic, resulting in religious social, economic, psychological effects. Okay, so there was need to further conduct research to understand what are these impacts and how these impacts could be mitigated if such an event occurred in future. Now let's first look at the religious impact. Of course, prevention is better than cure. And from a Maqasidu Sharia perspective, the first thing we have to do is to ensure that our life is protected in any case. Therefore, even though Hajj is a mandatory pillar of Islam and Umrah is a highly encouraged religious activity for Muslims to perform, in order to protect our life and to stop the containment of the COVID-19 virus, it was essential to temporarily bring hold to all the physical activities that were conducted where a crowd is gathered. And one of those activities are Hajj and Umrah activities as well. And as you know, there were a lot of fatwas issued during that time on why Muslims should refrain from getting to mosques or even to those congregation prayers which we perform daily or even weekly, because at the end of the day, first thing we have to do is to protect our life and other people's life being threatened because of our gatherings. So because of that, obviously we needed to create awareness at that point of time to many Muslims for them to understand why these gatherings should be banned, including the biggest gathering of the year, Hajj. But as you know, there are a lot of sentiments going on in the societies because of these bans, and different people have different perception about them. And at the end of the day, the government had to intervene, and for the public interest of all, these gatherings were banned. And it became to a whole situation whereby no one could individually decide what they want to do. For all the individuals, the decisions were taken by the respective governments. So we can say that from this, obviously there is a religious impact, because those religious activities that we used to perform by going physically to a place, whether it is a mosque or to Masjid al-Haram or to any other site in Saudi Arabia, we cannot do it just how we were doing it prior to the COVID. And to justify this, there were Sharia grounds that were presented. However, what we lacked was the awareness and the belief in these temporary situational recommendations given by the Sharia scholars. Now, there are social impacts of this issue as well, because as you know, Muslims start saving money to go to Hajj from a very early time of their life, and they ensure that they save enough so that they could go to the Hajj and perform the obligatory act at least before they die. And not only that, today going to Hajj doesn't depend only on the money you save. It's more than that, because there is a Hajj quota system which is managed by each and every country. For example, if you look at the Malaysian example, there is this report whereby it is said that during 2017, the current waiting period for Hajj pilgrimage registration with Tabung Haji is 89 years. If you look at Central Java, Indonesia, it was reported that in 2018, the Hajj waiting period is 21 years. And in 2016, it was reported that the average waiting time for Hajj in Indonesia is 37 years. So imagine a person has waited for both, to get the money first and for the quota as well. And let's assume that that person needs to go to Hajj in year 2020. And unfortunately, that couldn't happen in the year because of this COVID. So it creates not only an individual impact on the psychological factors of the person, but also it creates a social impact whereby the Hajj quota would have a delay, and there would be some glitch in those who are anticipating to go to the Hajj in immediate future. So therefore, we understood that the social impact caused by this Hajj is something we need to mitigate as well, because at the end of the day, if we can't create awareness about how the Hajj quota will be managed after there is a hold or suspension of it in 1 year, then definitely it would be something that the people will be very much worried about, and we might not be able to handle the situation as well. So whether there is a cancellation or postponement of the Hajj, definitely there will be an implication on the Hajj quota system, which is managed individually by the respective governments or the responsible authorities in different parts of the world. And furthermore, if the Hajj quota given to the specific countries are not clear after the pandemic or in the midst of the pandemic, again, that also causes some dilemma for these quota managing institutions, because then they wouldn't be able to clear the backlog as they have anticipated before COVID. So again, this creates some kind of uncertainty among those who want to go to Hajj, because they don't know exactly when they could perform the obligatory act, and they fear that they might die without performing their obligatory act. Next is the economic impact. Economic impact can be divided into two segments here. One is the economic impact which the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will face, and the other one is the economic impact which the respective countries from which the pilgrims go to Hajj or Umrah faces as well. Now, it is understood that for nearly 87% of the budget of KSA relies on oil revenue, and the oil industry accounts for 42% of its GDP. Hajj and Umrah, accounts to more than $12 billion to KSA's GDP annually, accounting for about 20% of the kingdom's non-oil GDP and 7% of its total GDP. So imagine if there's an oil crisis as well as a Hajj and Umrah crisis, as we can call it, in this situation. What will happen to the economy of the KSA itself, which is unimaginable during that time when we conducted the research, but now we understand the adverse effect exactly that they had to face because of this. Likewise, even the individual business entities like travel agents, airlines, restaurants, hotels, mobile communication companies that benefited from Hajj and Umrah pilgrims every year, they also had to, in the verge of, they had to face the bankruptcy, or they didn't get any business during the period because of the decisions taken in this regard. And it is said that between 25 and 30% of the private income of people around Makkah and Medina come from pilgrims. And imagine again what will happen to their income. So this created domino effect, and within Saudi Arabia also it created some economic issues, not only at the government level, but at private individual level as well. Okay, so according to the BBC, Hajj pilgrimage generates some 10 billion USD in 2011 for the economy of Saudi Arabia, and we can understand the adverse effect that will cause due to the ban of foreign pilgrims going to Saudi Arabia. And for those who were acting in the domestic countries, or we can say that those who were arranging Hajj and Umrah activities in their home countries, they also was adversely affected, because for some companies, what they said is already the money from the pilgrims, the potential pilgrims, were paid to these companies, and they've already bought the airplane ticket, and they've already paid for the hotels, and all the arrangements were made. And suddenly, when the announcement came, it was a surprise for them not only a surprise, but it was a nightmare for them because they don't know how to be accountable to the pilgrims who paid the money in advance, and they themselves don't know what is going to happen. So there was no certainty. Therefore, they couldn't be like answerable and held responsible for what was happening entirely because they don't know, it's beyond their control, they said. So if you look at this blue box, it is said the Saudi decision has struck hard the Umrah season, which reaches its climax in the month of Rajab, Shaban, and Ramadan. For sure, all the tourism companies organizing the Umrah and Hajj trips will suffer heavy losses. There are already visas and air tickets issued. There are also hotel reservations made in Mecca and Medina. What will happen to them? I don't know. So this is the typical answer or the questions that had in the minds of those who were arranging or dealing with Hajj and Umrah. And they couldn't give us precise answer for this due to lack of certainty. And we also have quoted one case study here to show how hard the suspension could hit an individual. So the person's name here is Hina Baig, lived in Washington. It took several years for Hina Baig to save up thousands of dollars for her family's special pilgrims in KSA. They were supposed to leave next week. On Wednesday, she learned that the Umrah trip was cancelled. Baig 40 shed tears, and she doesn't know what will happen to the USD 7,000 her family has spent. Hopefully we don't lose that money because then it will take me another 20 years to go, she said. So from this, we understand that at individual levels, even the potential pilgrims who were supposed to visit to KSA and do their worship activities faced uncertainty because there were no clear directions issued at that time. It's just a suspension. We don't know when the suspension will be removed and what is going to happen to the money which was paid, and even the organizers themselves didn't know what will happen to the money they paid to the KSA organizers, and whether there will be refunds or not was not something certain at that point of time. Now let's look at the psychological impact. Obviously, a lot of people have this hope that before they die, somehow they will be able to finish performing the fifth pillar of Islam, which is pilgrimage. However, unfortunately, those who tried their best to gather the required sum of money and wait until their quota comes, and they knew that, okay, in 2020, their quota has come and all their dreams is going to come true. Suddenly, one day they receive a phone call and they are told that you can't go this year and we don't know what is going to happen next. Especially those who are above 60 years or who has become very old, they already have this wish that they want to go there and perform it before they die because they are afraid that they might not have the strength to perform it if they further delay it. Now, in the same case which we discussed just now, we can also understand the psychological impact of the decision taken by the Saudi Arabia in the midst of the pandemic. Baig was reported as saying that for herself, she wanted the journey to be a family event, together with her 2 teenagers and husband. Having heard about the Hajj pilgrimages from childhood, I remember when you are a kid and you finally get to go to Disney, and it's sort of like that, but it's so spiritual, she said. So there is this anticipation to go there and to do the act. And as you know, normally Muslims, when they know the time that they will be going to Hajj, they do a lot of other complementary activities as well. They started visiting their relatives and anyone whom they will have to seek forgiveness, and they will be preparing their journey ahead of the actual time of the journey. And there are a lot of sentimental values or feelings which are attached to these worship activities as well. Now, from here, we see that to some individuals, the news of the sudden cancellation came with shock, which adds to their confusion and even distress. So much goes through in the mind of the affected person, as illustrated with the case of Faten Sobhi, an Egyptian woman of 56-year-old, who was thus quoted expressing her disappointment and resentment. She says, "It was the biggest shock of my life. Like most of my companions, I burst into tears when we were told that the Umrah flights have been stopped until further notice. I have paid £20,000 to a travel agency as the cost of the whole trip. Whenever I check with them about the situation, they keep telling them, only God knows. I don't care about the money, although it is part of my end of service reward as a hospital accountant. What I earn is to do Umrah." Okay, so we can see from here the sadness and the psychological experience one will go through when they hear the news that they're unable to go as anticipated on that particular year to Umrah or Hajj, and they also don't know what is going to happen to the money they paid and when they can exactly go. And people have these cultural and communal convictions associated with going to Hajj and Umrah as well. Some people might have this mindset that if for any reason, if they're unable to go to Hajj or Umrah as they have anticipated, it might be some kind of a punishment from God. And they might be like wondering why they are unable to perform such a holy activity when they have fulfilled all the criteria which they have to fulfill within their ability. So this is also some kind of a mindset we have seen in some of the societies. And this mindset is something we need to clarify to them by giving them the right information about such cases and why these incidents happen, so that at least their mind would be at rest. Now let us look at the recommendations and the conclusion. Of course, our finding of the paper indicated that there's a need for the respective governments of Muslim countries and Hajj and Umrah regulatory or management bodies to organize a global e-conference to meet and discuss the ways in which the implications caused due to the pandemic on Hajj or Umrah can be resolved. Because at the time we were coming up with this research, we found that there were no consensus or information that was circulating among the worldwide Hajj and Umrah related stakeholders so that they could provide the right information to those who are adversely affected or individuals who are adversely affected in different countries. So we believe that that was the best time to have at least an e-conference to meet and discuss what could be done and what are the types of implications which an individual should face because of a delay in their Hajj. The implication to the Hajj quota is one area that needed to be discussed. And obviously, Hajj is a matter of global concern for many Muslims, and therefore at the government level, for the public interest of all, there are certain decisions that were taken during that time even. However, how to translate that into a way that people could be encouraged to follow that type of restrictions imposed is something that needs to be deliberated and something that needs to be sorted out. Because, for example, let's say if we were able to tell the individuals exactly what is going to happen next, then it'll motivate them to keep quiet, keep calm until further announcements were made. But unfortunately, there were no announcements made on what will happen to the administrative matters related to the Hajj and Umrah. And then we also have put here that there is need to have internal standard operating procedures and health precautions that could be taken in managing the Hajj, which should be informed to all the stakeholders, because this is also something that was not done at the time when we were coming up with the research. And obviously, the precautions, the standard operating procedures need to be cleared at that point, because otherwise people would panic and they wouldn't know what to do next. And we also put in our paper that it is important to learn from this pandemic what has happened to the Hajj, because from our research we found that in the history there were no such event where there was a complete ban on Hajj like how we saw in 2020 for foreign pilgrims due to a pandemic like this. So because of that, we believe that we should be prepared for such unprecedented events in future, and we should be ready with the administrative procedures, so that at least there wouldn't be any lacuna in terms of understanding what is going to happen next. So we have taken these techniques to propose to manage Hajj in future if a pandemic comes like this from Burma and Key 2009. So there are certain aspects we need to look at. One is be adaptable. Corporations should handle a strategic inflection point by adopting radical technological, marketplace, or regulatory change, and via abrupt shifts in the trajectory of a trend creates both risks and opportunities for every organization. Isolating portfolio diversification, spread risks, costs and vulnerabilities across space, and ensure that not all assets are open to the same type of threat. Smoothing, spread risk, costs and vulnerabilities across time, and ensure that not all the assets are open to the same type of threats. Warning, use specific reporting requirements, internal structures, and triggers as a warning system. Agility, reducing the time and cost to prices between firms. Alliances between firms, NGOs, IGOs, and private stakeholders can help to mitigate risks by spreading risk between them. Environment shaping, lobbying, public relation, investment in community activities, that the arts and education as well. So I think we could follow the same techniques proposed here to prepare for a future situation that may be encountered like this. Now let's look at the proposed recommendations. Now for religious impact, to mitigate it, what we have proposed is that the misconceptions of the Hajj and Umrah suspension can be dispelled by creating awareness among Muslims all over the world on why it is taken as a necessary precautions befitting the phenomenon. Because at the end of the day, no matter how many religious opinions were given by the governments or by the respective fatwa authorities, if we can't convey that message to the individuals, they wouldn't be aware of why such decisions are taken in the first place. Therefore, protecting human life is much more important than going to a congregational prayer or to a religious gathering. Should be translated into a way how normal people on the road could understand and they could appreciate such views. Otherwise, it leads to a conflict between those who have believed that it is a must in any circumstance to do religious gatherings versus those who believe in the fatwas issued in this regard. So therefore, what a Muslim should do in the midst of a pandemic like this should be something that everybody should be aware of. What type of necessary actions can the government take in this case is also something which they should be aware of, because public interest is something that needs to be considered whenever we face a crisis like this. Next is social impact. The social effect on people initially given slots to perform Hajj before COVID-19 pandemic, but were or would be disqualified due to strict health checks to determine the eligible pilgrims later on. Because as you know, at first there was no screening of health or health checkups made. There was no COVID tests or anything related to checking whether the person is, of course, there is a fit and proper criteria that needs to be followed, but which is not so harsh as what we would follow after or in the midst of the pandemic. So because of this, a lot of people could be disqualified, and they were disqualified during that period to be qualified to perform Hajj. So because of that, there is uncertainty among this segment of population on when exactly they could perform Hajj, and there's no answer given by the authorities as well, because they also don't know when the situation will become normal. Therefore, at that time, while we were conducting the research, we felt that it is important to find a way forward in this regard and provide certainty for those who cannot or who are disqualified to do Hajj and Umrah in the midst of the pandemic, give them some kind of expectation on how in future they could perform the same activities just like before COVID, and to provide consolation to all those who are having who are adversely affected due to backlog quota system. There was also need to ensure that they understand the implications and what will happen to them in future. Whether they have to wait another 100 years or 50 years is something that needs to be clarified. Next is economic impact. One thing we've understood is that you can't rely on one type of activity to get revenue or income. It's better to diversify your portfolio of investment. So that is one thing that needs to be learned by the governments who were relying on either oil or only one segment of activities, rather than diversifying their economic activities to get revenue or income. So what we have stated here is that basically the governments need to intervene and provide certainty to those who are individuals or the Hajj managers who have paid their money to go to Hajj or Umrah, because without the state intervention, refund or having an amicable settlement might not be possible in this case, because anyhow, unexpected losses were something which cannot be totally eliminated at that stage, because already the payments were made and some of the people have already used the money, which cannot be refunded even if they want to, because they also didn't have any other way to get any money to do the refund. So in this instance, we believe that to mitigate the economic impact, especially at individual and at Hajj management level or Umrah management level, it is important the government to intervene and provide certainty to all those stakeholders who are waiting for a direction, either from the government of Saudi Arabia or their respective government on what to do next. Obviously, the psychological impact is the most difficult part of all of these. There's no single way or a magic formula to resolve this issue or to mitigate this impact, because I think the only way in this regard is just to give console, or we can say counseling, to those who are adversely affected about the reasons why it has happened and why they should just wait patiently until the time, until everything becomes normal. However, to do that, I mean, it's easy to say it, but to do that and to ensure that a person understands that from that aspect is something which is difficult to do. We have a lot of Quranic verses as well as hadith to support the importance of patience and why a Muslim should always have trust and faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and keep praying. And if the person has done all his effort to do something, Allah will give him the reward for that certain good action as well. So this is also something which we need to make Muslims aware about. And in order to mitigate all the psychological traumas and effects, we need to ensure that proper counseling is given to the affected individuals so that at least they won't be living a life thinking that God has punished them or having some misconception about what has happened. So that will be all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aisha. It was definitely a detailed explanation given by you on this article. So now I would like to begin with the questions if we have. Let me look at the chat box.
There are two.
Yeah, there's two messages. Okay, so we have a question from, I think, Brother Mustafa, right?
Yes. Do you think we are capable and ready and can expect the same pandemic alike in the future? What can the government do to assist the agency that is handling the Hajj and Umrah activities? In future, we don't know what will happen, but we have to be, what the pandemic has taught us is that we have to be ready for any type of unprecedented situation. And since in the COVID, we had, due to, a lot of unpreparedness, we had to face a lot of difficulties in handling the situation. So what I believe is that we have to be ready in future for a similar or reverse situation by taking precautions. And from the lessons we have learned from this pandemic, we understand the areas that we have to focus in future as well, which I mentioned in the recommendation part. And obviously, the government intervention is very much required when it comes to smoothing the effect of what has happened when the Hajj and Umrah was suspended, especially for individuals who has paid their money to those who are managing the Hajj and Umrah. And as for Hajj and Umrah managers or airlines or even those who are arranging accommodation or travel agents, as we call them, they also didn't know what was happening because they already paid the money to get the services, and suddenly everything needs to be like suspended. So they also didn't have any avenues to go and ask for help or to get refunds and things like that. The procedures were not clear. So it's very important to come up with proper policies and procedures related to refunding, related to monetary matters or financial matters related to Hajj and Umrah. And if we can have an ombudsman or an avenue to hear these cases out and provide justice in a fast and convenient manner, rather going to litigation, then that will also be good enough at this stage, because at the end of the day, we know that no matter whether the government intervene or not, we can't provide a general solution to all. We have to go case by case and provide solutions. So I think HISPA or ombudsman approach needs to be adopted for Hajj and Umrah as well, just like any other financial services we have in the market.
Thank you, Dr. Aisha. Any other question? You can still write. We still have a couple of minutes that we can allocate to the questions. Maybe a quick question from myself, Doctor.
Yes.
What will be, for example, a further research that you would recommend for current students? Because I know that the majority, a lot of people that are following us now are students. So maybe for either project paper or research for publishing an article, what will be something you recommend in this?
I think from this research, what we understood is obviously this is a qualitative research, right? So it would be good to have empirical or a quantitative research to understand the impact of what has happened during the pandemic, where the Hajj and Umrah was suspended. I think that would be one. And another one would be what type of a framework could be adopted to mitigate any uncertainties that would arise in a future unprecedented event, such as COVID-19, that may happen in future. So I think that type of a framework needs a lot of effort and a lot of research too, to find out how the stakeholders' risks in such a situation could be mitigated without compromising any type of public interest that we have to consider.
Great, thank you. So we have a question from Brother Muhammad Rushdie. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
How
So
government can assist for individual to perform Umrah by DIY or without travel agency during endemic COVID-19, which is a very good question. I think if I'm not, I mean, my information might be inaccurate, but as far as I know, now Saudi Arabia has started giving visiting visa or tourist visa. So if anybody wants, and if you're an eligible country, you could just take a visa and do your own Umrah without going through a travel agent. So that is something that could be considered, because all the restrictions imposed by COVID is now uplifted in Masjid al-Haram as well. So therefore, you have the opportunity to do that without the involvement of a travel agent like before. That's true. Financial assistance is not answer to all problems, because this involves a lot of other administrative arrangements as well. Even if you have money, you can't go to Hajj unless you have the quota and the ability as well. I'm talking about the physical strength and things like that.
Okay, I think we can still take one question if you have. Okay.
Yeah.
Adisa?
Oh, it's a long one.
Yeah, since
both Saudi Arabian government and Hajj and Umrah agencies incur losses from this occurrence, which is due act of Allah, I think social intervention by spirited individuals would go a long way. Maybe waqf is instituted as standby or tabarrut takaful insurance. Yes, for those who are unable to get refunds, or for those whose journey is stuck and they don't know when they could go, of course, we could come up with a takaful package that could cover such uncertainties as well. But unfortunately, with takaful also, the problem is this is a situation. Pandemic is an unprecedented event, and most of the initial takaful packages also will not cover this type of situations. Okay, so we need to come up with a customized version of takaful packages for those who might face this type of a situation. But the damage has already been done for those who are affected. Maybe in future we can think of how it could be done. And I believe that waqf could be a solution for those who lost their money in the process. Maybe we could come up with sadaqah or a waqf fund to help those who are adversely affected, who needs money.
Okay, so that was our last question. Before we end our session, please, I would like to request all participants to switch on your cameras for a photo session, and give us a quick smile also, please. Brother Hanif, can you monitor? Great.
Okay. Right.
Okay, in three.
One, two, three. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Can you mute your microphones, please? Brother Hanif, your microphone also. Okay, good. Okay, so that concludes our fourth INCEIF Research Sharing Series. Thank you again, Associate Professor Dr. Aishath Muneeza, for the great presentation. It was definitely a pleasure to have you all with us today. Thank you to all our participants for joining. We hope you have learned and enjoyed this presentation. I would like to inform that the journal article, COVID-19, its impact in Hajj and Umrah and the future direction, is accessible at the INCEIF Knowledge Repository, IKR platform for the INCEIF students, and at the INCEIF KMC for the subscribers. With that, thank you and have a pleasant weekend or week ahead.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah khairan.
Ameen, inshallah, all of us.